The moment his finger pressed the button, a jolt shot through me. The look in Logan's eyes was unmistakable, a clear understanding of what he now controlled. It was meant to be my sanctuary, a way to escape the monotony of my life within these walls. Thomas was perpetually absent, swallowed by business trips, leaving me alone in a house that felt too vast, too silent. Now, as I stood in the living room, Logan's gaze fixed on me in stunned realization. I knew my secret was exposed. "What the hell?" he muttered, his eyes flicking from the small remote in his hand to my face. I tried to feign indifference, to pretend it wasn't what he thought. But my body betrayed me. The flush creeping up my neck, the way I couldn't meet his eyes, it all screamed guilt. I wanted to deny it, but the words caught in my throat. His voice softened, disbelief lacing his tone. "This is yours, isn't it?" Logan asked. I whispered a weak no, stepping back, but he wasn't letting it go. He closed the distance, holding the remote up like a damning piece of evidence. "So, what happens if I press it again?" Logan clicked the button. A gasp escaped my lips as the device did exactly what it was designed to do. My knees buckled, and I gripped the couch for support. The playful smirk on his face vanished, replaced by something darker, more intense. It was in that moment, everything shifted. Thomas had always been a man driven by ambition, a quality I once admired, but now resented. Our marriage had begun with promises of equality and partnership. But over time, I became an accessory in his meticulously curated life. He was consumed by work, always chasing the next deal, the next merger, the next flight. Initially, I threw myself into renovating the house, hosting dinners, and volunteering. But the distractions faded, and loneliness crept in, a quiet ache that grew louder with each passing year. Logan's arrival only amplified the situation. He was Thomas's son from his first marriage, a young man I barely knew until he moved in at 23. He was everything Thomas wasn't: impulsive, passionate, and brutally honest. His presence was magnetic, impossible to ignore. He had returned from college after a fallout with his mother over his future. Thomas, ever the fixer, offered him a place to stay while he figured things out. But I suspected it was more about control than compassion. Thomas couldn't tolerate loose ends, and Logan's independence was a thread he couldn't leave untied. I never expected to feel anything for Logan beyond the politeness of a stepmother, but from the moment he arrived, there was an unspoken tension between us, a constant undercurrent that was never addressed. The day everything changed started like any other. Thomas had left for a week-long business trip, leaving the house unusually quiet. I spent the morning trying to distract myself from the restlessness that had been gnawing at me for weeks. I was rearranging throw pillows in the living room when Logan walked in. He was barefoot, his hair damp from the shower, holding a coffee mug that read, "World's Okayest Son." "Morning," he said, plopping down on the couch. "Morning," I replied, forcing a smile. He flipped through the TV channels aimlessly. "You don't mind, do you?" "Of course not," I said, though his presence already felt unsettling. As he leaned back, his hand brushed against something hidden between the cushions. Frowning, he reached down and pulled it out. "What's this?" he asked, holding up the small black remote. My stomach sank. I recognized it instantly. The sleek, discreet controller I thought I had hidden so well. "Nothing," I said quickly, my voice sharper than intended. He raised an eyebrow, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Nothing? Then why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" "Logan, give it to me," I said, stepping toward him. He pulled it back, his grin widening. "Relax, I'm just curious. What's it for?" A sound system. I reached for the remote, but he dodged me, holding it out of reach. Logan, I'm serious. Give it back. And then he pressed the button. The playful expression on his face vanished, replaced by something darker. This is yours? He asked, his voice soft but deliberate. I didn't respond, my face burning with shame. Oh, it is, he said, leaning back against the couch. Interesting. Logan, please, just give it to me and let's forget this ever happened. He tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve. I don't think I can forget this. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling as I reached for the remote again, but he didn't move, his eyes locked on mine. What else are you hiding, Margaret? He asked softly. Logan, stop, I whispered, my voice weak. He leaned forward, holding the remote just out of reach. Why are you afraid? Afraid I'll discover who you really are? Something inside me snapped. The weight of years spent pretending to be someone I wasn't crashed down on me. You don't know anything about me, I said, my voice trembling with anger. Then tell me, he said, his tone soft but insistent. For a long moment, neither of us moved, the tension between us suffocating. Finally, without thinking, I snatched the remote from his hand and as he stormed out of the room. The rest of the day was spent avoiding him, the weight of the encounter pressing down on me. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the memory of his voice, his gaze, the way he had seen right through me. That night, as I lay awake in bed, I heard a soft knock at my door. Margaret. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. I didn't answer, my heart racing as I heard him open the door and step inside. We need to talk, he said, his tone softer now. Logan, go back to bed, I said, my voice trembling. He didn't move. Not until you tell me the truth. I turned to face him, my breath catching as I saw the intensity in his eyes. What truth? I whispered. His gaze didn't waver. The truth about you, about us. His words hung in the air, an unspoken invitation. The truth about us. The room felt suffocating, my thoughts colliding as I tried to find my footing. There is no us, I said, my voice quivering. He stepped closer, his silhouette framed by the faint glow of moonlight. You don't believe that, not after today. I sat up, pulling the blanket tighter around me, trying to shield myself from his gaze. What happened today was a mistake, a misunderstanding. You keep telling yourself that, he said, his voice calm but firm. But we both know it's more than that. I wanted to deny it, to push him away, but the truth was already clawing at me. The days that followed were filled with tension and avoided glances. Logan seemed content to wait while I wrestled with my own thoughts. But things had changed. Every time we crossed paths, the air crackled with unspoken words. It was a quiet afternoon when the dam finally broke. Thomas was still away, leaving the house silent except for the faint hum of the dishwasher. I was folding laundry when Logan walked in, his expression unreadable. We need to talk, he said, his voice firm. I didn't look up. There's nothing to talk about. Stop lying to yourself, Margaret, he said, stepping closer. You're not afraid of this because it's wrong. You're afraid because it feels right. I dropped the shirt in my hands, his words cutting through me like a knife. Don't, I whispered. Don't what? He asked softly. Don't tell the truth, or don't remind me of what I already know. I turned to face him, my chest tightening as I met his gaze. You don't understand what you're saying. I understand more than you think, he said, his eyes searching mine. I've seen how lonely you are, how hard you try to hide it. Tears pricked my eyes, and I looked away, unable to hold his gaze. This isn't about me, I said. It is, he said, stepping closer. And it's about me too. I'm not just a kid, Margaret. I know what I feel, and I think you feel it too. His words hung between us, daring me to deny them, but I couldn't. The first time it happened, it was almost an accident. We were in the library, a room Thomas rarely used, but one I had claimed as my sanctuary. I was standing by the window, staring out at the garden when Logan entered. "I didn't mean to scare you," he said, his voice low. "You didn't," I replied, though my hands trembled as I placed the book I hadn't been reading back down. He closed the door behind him, his footsteps soft against the carpet as he crossed the room. "I've been thinking about you, Margaret," Logan said. "I can't stop." I turned to face him, my heart pounding as he stopped just inches away. "This has to stop," I said. He shook his head, his eyes locking onto mine. "You don't want it to stop." "Neither do I." His words broke through my final resistance. Before I could think, before I could stop myself, I reached for him, my fingers brushing his as he closed the distance between us. The days that followed were both exhilarating and terrifying. We were careful, always watching for signs of prying eyes or suspicious glances. The house became a minefield of secrets, each room holding its own risks and rewards. In the kitchen, our hands brushed as we passed by the sink. In the hallway, a fleeting touch on my arm sent shivers down my spine. In the library, under the cover of shadows, we whispered confessions that felt more dangerous than any physical act. But the thrill of secrecy came at a price. Every stolen moment reminded us of the line we had crossed, the rules we had broken, and the lives we were jeopardizing. The first real threat to our secret came from James, Logan's childhood friend. He had stopped by unannounced one evening, his charm masking a sharp wit that made me uneasy. "Nice place you've got here," James said, his gaze lingering on the family photos lining the mantel. Logan stiffened beside me, his posture immediately defensive. "We like it," I said simply. James smirked, his eyes flickering between the two of us. "You seem close." Logan's voice edged with warning. "James, let's not make this awkward." James held up his hands in mock surrender, but the look in his eyes told me he wasn't finished. Later that night, Logan found me in the kitchen, his expression tense. "He knows something," he said, his voice low. "James?" I asked, my stomach twisting. "Yeah, he's not stupid," Logan replied. "And he's always been jealous of me. If he figures this out—" I didn't need him to finish the sentence. The stakes were already high enough without adding another player to the game. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice trembling. Logan reached for my hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "We stick to the plan. No one finds out." I nodded, but the knot in my stomach only tightened. The balance we'd precariously maintained began to tilt, and it wasn't long before cracks started to appear in our carefully constructed facade. The first complication came from Thomas's business associate Claire, a sharp and ambitious woman with a penchant for prying. Claire had always been a fixture in Thomas's professional life, attending his dinners, overseeing his projects, and inserting herself into his personal affairs whenever she could. She was charming in a way that disarmed most people, but I had never trusted her. It started innocuously enough. Claire stopped by one afternoon while Thomas was away, armed with a bottle of wine and an air of false camaraderie. "I thought you might appreciate some company," she said, handing me the bottle with a too bright smile. I forced a smile, ushering her into the kitchen. "That's kind of you, Claire. I wasn't expecting anyone." She shrugged, her eyes sweeping the room as if cataloging every detail. "Thomas mentioned you've been spending more time at home lately. I thought I'd check in." Her words were casual, but there was an edge to them that made me uneasy. "Just keeping things in order while he's away," I said, keeping my tone light. Claire's gaze flickered to the open door leading to the hallway. "And Logan, how's he adjusting?" I froze for half a second, barely noticeable, but enough to make my heart race. "He's fine," I said quickly. "Why do you ask?" Claire tilted her head, a coy smile tugging at her lips. "Oh, no reason. He's just grown up quite a bit since I last saw him. Don't you think?" Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Later that evening, I found Logan in the study, his expression tense as he stared out the window. "Claire was here," I said quietly, closing the door behind me. He turned to face me, his jaw tightening. "What did she want?" "To make herself comfortable," I replied, the bitterness in my voice unmistakable. Logan stepped closer, his brow furrowing. "She suspects something, doesn't she?" "I don't know," I admitted, sinking into one of the armchairs. "But she's watching us. I can feel it." Logan knelt in front of me, his hands resting on the arms of the chair. "We'll handle her," he said, his voice low and steady. "Logan, no," I interrupted, my eyes locking on his. "I won't let her ruin this. I won't let anyone ruin this," Logan said, his eyes full of determination. The second complication came from James. His arrival was as unexpected as it was unwelcome. He showed up late one night, grinning like he owned the place, his usual bravado in full force. "Thought I'd crash here for a bit," he announced, dropping his duffel bag in the foyer. Logan stiffened beside me, his posture immediately defensive. "You could have called," he said, his tone clipped. James smirked, clapping Logan on the shoulder. "Where's the fun in that?" He turned to me, his smile widening. "You don't mind, do you, Margaret?" "Of course not," I said, though my stomach turned at the thought of him staying under our roof. James's presence was a constant source of tension. He had a way of inserting himself into every conversation, every interaction, his sharp wit always teetering on the edge of something cruel. One evening, as we sat in the living room, James leaned back in his chair, his gaze flickering between Logan and me. "You two have gotten close," he remarked, his tone light but probing. Logan stiffened, his jaw tightening. "We live in the same house, James. What do you expect?" James chuckled, swirling his glass of whiskey. "Fair point, but still, you seem to spend an awful lot of time together." I forced a laugh, hoping to diffuse the tension. "Logan's been helping me with some projects around the house. It's been a nice distraction." James smirked, but didn't waver. "I'll bet." The tipping point came one afternoon when James and Claire crossed paths at the house. Claire had stopped by unannounced again, her curiosity clearly piqued. James, ever the opportunist, wasted no time ingratiating himself with her, their conversation filled with thinly veiled barbs and glances in my direction. "Quite the setup you've got here," Claire remarked, her gaze lingering on the family photos lining the mantel. James grinned, leaning against the arm of the couch. "Oh, you should see the dynamics, it's fascinating." Claire's smile was sharp, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I'll bet." That evening, as I paced in the kitchen, Logan stormed in, his frustration evident. "James is going to ruin everything," he said, slamming a glass onto the counter. "I know," I replied, my voice trembling. "He's already sniffing around, and now Claire's in the mix. It's only a matter of time before one of them puts the pieces together." "What do we do?" I asked, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Logan reached for my hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "We stick to the plan. No one finds out." I nodded, but the knot in my stomach only tightened. The balance we had precariously maintained began to tilt, and it wasn't long before cracks started to appear in our carefully constructed facade. The first crack came when Claire cornered me in the hallway, her tone casual but her words cutting. "You've been quiet, Telly Margaret," she said, her smile sharp. "Anything you'd like to share?" I forced a laugh, shaking my head. "Not at all. Just busy with the house." Claire tilted her head, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Funny. That's what Thomas said the last time we talked." My breath caught, but I managed to keep my expression neutral. "And what exactly did he say?" Claire's smile widened. "Just that things seem different around here." That night, Logan and I met in the library, the weight of the day pressing down on us. "We're running out of time," Logan said, his voice low. "I know," I whispered, tears pricking at my eyes. "I don't know how much longer we can keep this up." Logan stepped closer, his hand brushing against mine. "We'll figure it out together." But even as he said it, I could feel the walls closing in, the inevitable truth waiting to shatter everything we had built. The confrontation was inevitable. With James's sharp intuition and Claire's prying eyes, the threads of our secret were unraveling faster than I could hold them together. Every glance, every stray word felt like a trap, a moment that might give away the truth. The tipping point came on a stormy evening. Rain battered the windows, and the sound of thunder rolled through the house. Thomas had returned unexpectedly, his presence filling the space with a quiet tension. He was in the study with Claire, discussing business, or so I thought, while Logan and I tried to maintain the illusion of normalcy. But everything fell apart when Thomas called me into the study. I entered hesitantly, my palms damp as I smoothed the fabric of my blouse. "Close the door," he said, without turning around. I obeyed, my heart pounding. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Thomas turned, his face unreadable. "I think you know." "Thomas, stop," I began, but he cut me off. He gestured to Claire, who slid a folder across the desk toward me. I picked it up, my hands trembling as I flipped it open. Inside were photos, grainy but damning, of Logan and me in the garden, in the library, even in the kitchen, our stolen glances captured like pieces of evidence in a trial. My breath caught, and I looked up to find Thomas staring at me, his expression a mix of betrayal and fury. "What is this?" I whispered. "You tell me," Thomas said, his voice cold. Logan burst into the study, his presence like a thunderclap. "What's going on?" he demanded, his eyes darting between Thomas and me. "Perfect timing," Thomas said, his sarcasm biting. He held up one of the photos. "Care to explain this?" Logan's jaw tightened, but he didn't back down. "You've been spying on us." "Spying?" Thomas barked a humorless laugh. "You think I need to spy to know when something's wrong in my own house?" "This isn't what you think," I began. But Thomas cut me off. "Don't insult me, Margaret. You've been lying to me for months, both of you." Claire cleared her throat, her voice smooth and calculated. "Maybe we should all take a step back. Emotions are running high." "Stay out of this, Claire," Logan snapped, his anger flaring. Claire raised her hands in mock surrender, but the smirk on her face made it clear she was enjoying the spectacle. The argument spiraled out of control, accusations flew back and forth. Thomas accused Logan of betrayal, of exploiting my loneliness. Logan fired back, calling Thomas a neglectful husband who only cared about his image. "You were never there for her," Logan shouted. "You left her alone in this house like a ghost." Thomas retorted, his voice dripping with contempt. I stood frozen, my heart breaking as the two most important men in my life tore each other apart. The breaking point came when Claire dropped her final bombshell. "You know, Thomas," she began, her tone almost casual, "if you're looking for loyalty, maybe you should take a closer look at your own affairs." Thomas froze, his glare snapping to her. "What the hell are you talking about?" Claire smiled, her victory complete. "Oh, come on. Did you really think I didn't know? All those late nights, the trips with clients. You've been playing this game a lot longer than Margaret." The room went silent, the weight of her words settling over us like a suffocating fog. "You're lying," Thomas said, his voice low and dangerous. Claire shrugged, a nonchalant smile on her face. "Believe what you want, but maybe you should think twice before throwing stones." Thomas stormed out of the room, his fury palpable. Claire followed, her smirk still in place, leaving Logan and me alone. In the aftermath, the silence between us was heavy with everything unsaid. "This is my fault," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "No," Logan said, stepping closer. "This is on him, on them, not you." I shook my head, my guilt threatening to consume me. "I've ruined everything." Logan cupped my face in his hands, his gaze steady. "You haven't ruined anything. We're going to get through this together." I wanted to believe him, to believe that we could find a way out of this mess together. But the storm we had unleashed felt unstoppable. The next day, the photos were leaked. I don't know how they got out. Claire's meddling, Thomas's rage, or James's jealousy. But by morning, our faces were front-page news. The headlines were brutal, painting us as villains in a scandal that consumed the town. Thomas issued a statement, cold and calculated, framing himself as the wronged party. "Betrayal by those closest to you is the deepest cut," he said in one interview, his voice heavy with manufactured sorrow. Logan and I were vilified, our names dragged through the mud by tabloids hungry for drama. The walls of the house felt like a prison, the whispers and stares of the outside world closing in. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Logan packed a bag. "We can't stay here," he said, his tone resolute. "Where will we go?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Anywhere but here," he replied, "as long as we're together." I looked around the house, the life I had built crumbling before my eyes. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I couldn't face it without him. Taking his hand, I stepped into the unknown, leaving behind everything but the promise of what we could be. The drive was silent, except for the rhythmic hum of the tires on the asphalt. Logan stared straight ahead, his jaw tight, while I gripped the edge of my seat, my fingers aching from how hard I was clenching them. Every mile we put between us and the house felt like a breath of fresh air after suffocating. But it wasn't enough to erase the weight of everything we'd left behind. The motel Logan found was small and unassuming, tucked away along a forgotten highway. The fluorescent sign buzzed faintly, casting an eerie glow over the parking lot. "We'll stay here for the night," he said, as he grabbed our bags from the back seat. I nodded, too drained to argue. Inside the room, I sank onto the bed, my hands trembling. The news had already begun to spread. My phone buzzed incessantly with missed calls and messages, each one tying me to the wreckage we'd left behind. I turned it off, dropping it onto the nightstand as though it burned my skin. Logan knelt in front of me, his hands resty, hung gently on my knees. "Hey," he said softly, his voice pulling me back to the present. "We're going to get through this." I met his eyes, searching for the confidence I lacked. "Everything's falling apart." "Let it," he said firmly. "Let it all fall apart. We'll start over, just you and me." Tears filled my eyes as I shook my head. "I've ruined everything." Logan cupped my face in his hands, his gaze steady. You haven't ruined anything. We're going to get through this together. I wanted to believe him, to believe that we could find a way out of this mess together, but the storm we had unleashed felt unstoppable. The next day, the photos were leaked. I don't know how they got out. Claire's meddling, Thomas's rage, or James's jealousy. But by morning our faces were plastered across every news outlet. The headlines were vicious. Stepmother scandal rocks elite circles, one read. Another declared, from housewife to headline, the affair that shattered a family. Logan sat beside me, scrolling through his phone, his face unreadable. They're painting us like monsters, he muttered. They're not wrong, I whispered, the guilt weighing heavily on me. He turned to me sharply, his voice fierce. Don't say that. You're not a monster, Margaret. You're human, and you don't owe anyone an apology for that. The motel phone rang suddenly, its shrill tone cutting through the quiet. Logan and I exchanged a glance before he picked it up. Hello, he said, his expression darkening as he listened. We're not interested, he said before slamming the phone down. Who was it? I asked, my stomach twisting. Reporters, he said grimly. They found us. By the time we left the motel, the reporters were already circling. A black sedan was parked near the entrance, its occupants pretending to check a map while their cameras peeked through the cracked windows. Logan noticed them first and tightened his grip on my hand. Don't look at them, he whispered, leading me to the car. I nodded, keeping my head down as we slid inside. The engine roared to life, and Logan wasted no time pulling out of the lot, the sedan following at a distance. Where do we go now? I asked, my voice trembling. Somewhere they won't find us, he replied, his eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. We ended up in a small coastal town hours away, a place where the salty breeze promised anonymity. The motel we found was older but clean, its cracked sign advertising ocean views that were barely visible through the fog. I stood by the window of our room, watching the waves crash against the shore as Logan paced behind me. The tension between us was palpable, the weight of everything we'd lost pressing down on us. You regret this, don't you? He asked suddenly, his voice cutting through the quiet. I turned to face him, my chest tightening. What? Coming with me. He nodded, his expression softening. Leaving everything behind. I hesitated, the truth too complicated to put into words. I don't know, I admitted finally. I don't know what I feel anymore. His expression softened, and he stepped closer, taking my hands in his. I know it's not easy, but I meant what I said. I'll never let them take you from me. We'll find a way to move forward together. I wanted to believe him, to believe that the storm we had weathered was behind us. But as I looked into his eyes, I couldn't shake the doubt lingering in the back of my mind. The days turned into weeks, and we settled into a tenuous routine. Logan found odd jobs to keep us afloat, while I kept a low profile, avoiding the outside world as much as possible. But the whispers of our past were never far away. Every knock on the door, every unfamiliar face felt like a threat. A reminder that the scandal we had left behind could find us at any moment. One evening, as we sat on the beach watching the sunset, Logan reached for my hand. Do you think we'll ever be free of this? He asked, quietly. I looked at him, my heart aching at the vulnerability in his voice. I don't know, I said honestly, but I know I don't want to face it alone. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in shades of gold and pink, I allowed myself to believe, for the first time in a long time, that we might find peace. Whatever came next, we would face it together. The quiet life we had carved out by the sea, though peaceful, was always tinged with a sense of impermanence. The whispers of our past followed us like shadows, lengthening with each passing day. We were living in a liminal space, caught between the life we had left behind and the uncertain future that lay ahead. Logan worked tirelessly, taking on any job he could find, his hands calloused and his spirit resilient. I, in turn, tried to build a semblance of normalcy, cooking meals, cleaning our small motel room, and attempting to ignore the constant gnawing fear that we would be found. One afternoon, as I was walking back from the small market, a familiar face stopped me in my tracks. It was James, his eyes cold and his smile devoid of its usual charm. "Fancy seeing you here, Margaret," he said, his voice laced with a venom I hadn't heard before. "What do you want, James?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my attempts to remain composed. "Just to see how the mighty have fallen," he sneered, "and to deliver a message." He pulled out his phone, showing me a picture of Thomas, his face grim and determined. "He's coming for you, Margaret. Both of you." My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. "You think you can hide forever?" James continued, his voice dripping with malice. "He'll find you. He always does." I turned and ran, the words echoing in my ears, a chilling reminder of the life we were trying to escape. When I reached our room, Logan was waiting, his brow furrowed with concern. I told him everything, the fear in my voice mirroring the dread in my heart. "We have to leave," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "No," Logan replied, his voice firm. "We're not running anymore. We'll face him." That night, we packed our bags, not with the intention of fleeing, but with the resolve to confront our past. We knew Thomas would find us, and we decided to meet him on our own terms. The next morning, as the sun rose over the ocean, a black car pulled up to the motel. Thomas stepped out, his expression a mask of cold determination. He looked older, his eyes hollow, and his posture rigid. "Margaret," he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. "Logan." We stood our ground, the salty breeze whipping our hair, the roar of the ocean a backdrop to our confrontation. "You came," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil within. "I did," Thomas replied. "To end this." "It's already over, Thomas," Logan said, his voice calm but resolute. "You can't control us anymore." "Control?" Thomas scoffed. "You both betrayed me. You ruined everything." "We didn't ruin anything," I said, stepping forward. "You did. With your neglect, your lies, your obsession with control." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truths. Thomas's face contorted with rage, but beneath the anger, I saw a flicker of something else, regret, perhaps, or a desperate attempt to cling to the life he had lost. "You don't understand," he said, his voice strained. "I did everything for you. For us." "You did everything for yourself," Logan said, his voice cutting through the silence. "You never saw us, not really." The confrontation stretched on, a painful unraveling of years of resentment and unspoken pain. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the sand, we laid bare the wounds that had festered for too long. Thomas, stripped of his facade, looked smaller, more vulnerable. I saw not the man I had married, but a broken figure, lost in the labyrinth of his own making. Finally, as the last of the recriminations faded, a sense of weary acceptance settled over us. Thomas turned to leave, his shoulders slumped, his steps heavy. "I won't bother you again," he said, his voice barely audible. He got into the car, and it drove away, leaving us standing on the shore, the silence broken only by the crashing waves. The aftermath was a strange mix of relief and melancholy. We had faced our demons, and though the scars remained, they no longer defined us. We stayed in the coastal town, building a new life, a life built on honesty and mutual respect. Logan continued to work, his hands now familiar with the rough texture of labor, his spirit unbroken. I found a small job at the local library, surrounded by stories of other lives, other struggles, and other triumphs. We learned to live with the whispers, the occasional stares, the lingering shadows of our past. They were a part of us, a reminder of the journey we had undertaken. But they no longer held the power to define our present or dictate our future. We had found a kind of peace, a quiet understanding that came from facing the storm and emerging stronger on the other side. One evening, as we walked along the beach, the sky painted in hues of orange and purple, Logan took my hand. "Do you think we made the right choice?" he asked, his voice soft. I looked at him, my heart filled with a quiet certainty. "We made the only choice," I replied. "The choice to live, to love, to be free." We walked on, hand in hand, the waves whispering secrets to the shore, the stars twinkling above. A silent promise of a future we would build together. A future where the past was a lesson, not a burden. And in that moment, I knew we had found our peace. Not in forgetting, but in remembering, in understanding, and in choosing to move forward, together.